Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host today, Samantha Studebaker Carl, and I'm here with my good friends Stan and Jason and Lori and Catherine. And today we are going to continue our discussion of the book, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And we are on page 201 in the hard copy at the part that's titled, Why Want Another Universe If This One Has Dogs? But before we get going, I want to give my friends an opportunity to introduce themselves. And then, Catherine, you can jump out and read for us. That'd be great.
Okay, let's not all jump out at once. I'll start. Dan Sissick. I'm here in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Hey, Jason Roberts here in Tampa, Florida. Great to be here.
You might need to help Lori.
Lori Hammond's in Denver here. I couldn't get my microphone turned on.
All right, Catherine Clement, and I'll be doing the reading. Give me just 1 second. All right. Why want another universe if this one has dogs? The restaurant was on Castle Road, around the corner from String Theory, and they had to walk past the shop to get there. The familiarity of it felt strange. When she reached the shop, she saw that something wasn't right. There were no guitars in the window. There was nothing in the window except a faded piece of A4 paper stuck on the inside of the glass. She recognized Neil's writing. Alas, String Theory is no longer able to trade in these premises. Due to an increase in rent, we simply couldn't afford to go on. Thanks to all our loyal customers. Don't think twice. It's all right. You can go your own way. God only knows what will be without you. Dylan was amused. I see what they did there. Then a moment later, I was named after Bob Dylan. Did I ever tell you that? I can't remember. You know, the musician. Yes, I've heard of Bob Dylan, Dylan. My older sister is called Suzanne after the Leonard Cohen song. Nora smiled. My parents loved Leonard Cohen. Ever been in there? Dylan asked her. Looked like a great shop. Once or twice. Thought you would have been. What with you being musical, you used to play the piano, didn't you? Used to. Yeah, keyboards, a little. Nora saw the notice looked old. She remembered what Neil had said to her. I can't pay you to put off customers with your face looking like a wet weekend. Well, Neil, maybe it wasn't my face after all. They carried on walking. Dylan, do you believe in parallel universes? He shrugged. I think so. What do you think you're doing in another life? Do you think this is a good universe, or would you rather be in a universe where you left Bedford? Not really. I'm happy here. Why want another universe if this one has dogs? Dogs are the same here as they are in London. I had a place, you know. I'd got into Glasgow University to do veterinary medicine, and I went for a week, but I missed my dogs too much. Then my dad lost his job and couldn't really afford for me to go. So, yeah, I never got to be a vet, and I really wanted to be a vet. But I don't regret it. I have a good life. I've got some good friends, and I've got my dogs. Nora smiled. She liked Dylan, even if she doubted she could be as attracted to him as this other Nora. He was a good person, and good people are rare. As they reached the restaurant, they saw a tall, dark-haired man in running gear jogging towards them. It took a disorientating moment for Nora to realize it was Ash, the Ash who had been a surgeon, the Ash who had been a customer at String Theory and who had asked her out for coffee, the Ash who had confronted her in the hospital and who had knocked on her door in another world last night to tell her that Voltaire was dead. It seemed so recent, that memory, and yet it was hers alone. He was obviously doing some training for the half marathon on Sunday. There was no reason to believe that the Ash in this life was any different from the one in her root life, except the chances were that he probably hadn't found a dead Voltaire last night. Or maybe he had, though Voltaire wouldn't have been called Voltaire. "Hi," she said, forgetting which timeline she was in. And Ash smiled back at her, but it was a confused smile. Confused, but kind, which somehow made Nora feel even more cringy. Because, of course, in this life, there had not been the knock on her door. There had never been the asking for a coffee or the purchase of a Simon and Garfunkel songbook. "Who was that?" Dylan asked. "Oh, just someone I knew in another life." Dylan was confused, shook it away like rain, and then they were there. Dinner with Dylan. La Catina had hardly changed in years. Nora had a flashback to the evening she had taken Dan there years ago on his first visit to Bedford. They'd sat at a table in a corner and had too many margaritas and talked about their joint future. It was the first time that Dan had expressed his dream of living in a pub in the country. They had been on the verge of moving in together, just as Nora and Dylan apparently were in this life. Now she remembered it. Dan had been pretty rude to the waiter, and Nora had overcompensated with excessive smiles. It was one of life's rules. Never trust someone who is willingly rude to low-paid service staff. And Dan had failed at that one, and many of the others. Although Nora had to admit La Catina would not have been her top choice to return to. "I love this place," Dylan said now, looking around at the busy, garish red and yellow decor. Nora wondered, quietly, if there was any place Dylan didn't or wouldn't love. He seemed like he would be able to sit in a field near Chernobyl and marvel at the beautiful scenery. Over black bean tacos, they talked about dogs and school. Dylan had been 2 years below Nora and remembered her primarily as the girl who was good at swimming. He even remembered the school assembly, which Nora had long tried to repress, where she had been called on stage and given a certificate for being an exceptional representative of Hazeldean Comp. Now she thought about it, that was possibly the moment Nora had begun to go off swimming, the moment she found it harder being with her friends, the moment she slunk away into the margins of school life. "I used to see you in the library during breaks," he said, smiling at the memory. "I remember seeing you playing chess with that librarian we used to have. What was her name?" "Mrs. Elm," Nora said. "That's it, Mrs. Elm." And then he said something even more startling. "I saw her the other day." "Did you?" "Yeah, she was on Shakespeare Road with someone dressed in a uniform like a nurse's outfit. I think she was heading into the care home after a walk. She looked very frail, very old." For some reason, Nora had assumed Mrs. Elm had died years ago, and that the version of Mrs. Elm she always saw in the library had made that idea more likely, as that version was always the exact version she had been at school, preserved in Nora's memory like a mosquito in amber. Oh no, poor Mrs. Elm. I loved her. Shall we talk? You want me to continue?
I'll just go ahead and continue. It's only this one more section till the end of this life story.
Okay. Last Chance Saloon. After the meal, Nora went back to Dylan's house to watch the Ryan Bailey movie. They had a half-drunk bottle of wine that the restaurant let them take home. Her self-justification regarding going to Dylan's was that he was sweet and open and would reveal a lot about their life without having to pry too deep. He lived in a small terraced house on Huxley Avenue that he had inherited from his mom. The house was made even smaller by the amount of dogs there. There were 5 that Nora could see, though there may have been more lurking upstairs. Nora had always imagined she liked the smell of a dog, but she suddenly realized there was a limit to this fondness. Sitting down on the sofa, she felt something hard beneath her, plastic ring for the dogs to gnaw on. She put it on the carpet amid the other chew toys. The toy bone, the foam yellow ball with chunks bitten out of it, a half-massacred soft toy. A chihuahua with cataracts tried to have sex with her right leg. "Stop that, Pedro," said Dylan, laughing as he pulled the little creature away from her. Another dog, a giant, meaty, chestnut-colored Newfoundland, was sitting next to her on the sofa, licking Nora's ear with a tongue the size of a slipper, meaning that Dylan had to sit on the floor. "Do you want the sofa?" "No, I'm fine on the floor." Nora didn't push it. In fact, she was quite relieved. It made it easier to watch Last Chance Saloon without any further awkwardness. And the Newfoundland stopped licking her ear and rested its head on her knee, and Nora felt, well, not happy exactly, but not depressed either. And yet, as she watched Ryan Bailey tell his on-screen love interest that life is for living cupcake, while simultaneously being informed by Dylan that he was thinking of letting another dog sleep in his bed, he cries all night, he wants his daddy. Nora realized she wasn't too enamored with this life. And also, Dylan deserved the other Nora, the one who had managed to fall in love with him. This was a new feeling, as if she was taking someone's place. Realizing she had a high tolerance for alcohol in this life, she poured herself some more wine. It was a pretty ropey Zinfandel from California. She stared at the label on the back. There was, for some reason, a mini co-autobiography of a woman and a man, Janine and Terence Thornton, who owned the vineyard which had made the wine. She read the last sentence. "When we were first married, we always dreamed of opening our own vineyard one day, and now we have made that dream a reality. Here at Dry Creek Valley, our life tastes as good as a glass of Zinfandel." She stroked the large dog who'd been licking her and whispered a goodbye into the Newfoundland's wide, warm brow as she left Dylan and his dogs behind.
Well, that was cool. Thanks for another great reading. That was really very nice.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Sure.
Yes, I will second and echo that sentiment. You do such a good job of reading, and it helps pull us into the stories and all that. So it's very wonderful.
Yeah, and you have obviously a very good understanding of the characters, and almost can sense their energy in your voice. It was interesting that the characters seem to be the same quite a bit, and the storylines just keep changing slightly.
For me, it was interesting how Nora is, I think, slowly in the back of her mind, realizing that her initial life is probably the best version of her life that she really wants to, I think, maybe get back to, but maybe make some tweaks that she's learned from being able to go to the other lives to make that life be more what I think she's looking for, which is, I think, something we all do as we get older in our lives. We start off with these young, big, grand ideas of what we want our life and think our life will be. But as we go through and we come through relative forks in our life where we can make decisions, and sometimes we make them like split second to go whichever direction. And then as we look back, we think, oh, well, maybe that would have been. So then we, next time come around where we have that split second, we might try and go maybe a different direction to where, because even though I have some regrets about things in my life, overall, I haven't had a bad life. I've been pretty blessed. I've been able to, obtain basically two homes. I bought my first home and then sold it and then bought this home. Granted, with all its struggles and endeavors that have come up. But I've always had food on my table. I've clothes on my back, family and friends that like and love and enjoy, me being around. So I think she's starting to unravel that for the life that she was in. And I think that's something now. I think that's how she's kind of starting to look at it with each new life that she gets to visit.
Yeah, I think each one she kind of like overcomes some kind of a regret that she had, or realizes that a regret is not what she thought it was, or she was putting too much pressure on herself. Just like this situation with the string theory store, where he still ends up closing the store, and before, in her core life, she, you know, he was blaming her for the store closing, and she was taking that on as if it was all her fault, and she could never do anything right, and she was always letting everybody down. And so now she's starting to realize that, okay, maybe that's just one way of looking at things, and it's not my fault that that happened. It's not. Yeah. I think you're right, Dan. I think that there's a good possibility at the end of this book, or the end of this, is that she's probably just going to choose her original life and realize, okay, it's not so bad as I thought it was. I just thought the wrong way. I was thinking about things in the wrong way, and now she realizing, each life that she's stepping into, she's realizing some different aspect of that is changing the way she feels about herself in general.
Do you think that if she gets back to her original root life, if that does become the possibility, or Mrs. Elms helps her to get to that, do you think she'll start making choices to where she'll, and I'm going to say it this way, start living that life as in living it rather than just kind of letting it happen to her, if you understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I mean, I would think so. I mean, because I feel like the whole issue with her committing suicide in the first place was because she felt like she was letting everybody else down, and because she wasn't doing what she thought she should do. And if she, now she's learning that, oh, okay, well, what I should do has been based on what everybody else thinks I should do, or how I was being was because I was feeling like I didn't have any confidence in myself, or um I mean, she's got all these different aspects where she's been telling herself all this baloney, and which caused her to get to the point where she didn't feel like her life was worth living. And now she's trying out all these new lives, or parallel lives, if you will, and realizing some things that she thought that she wanted isn't really what she wanted. And she's realizing that some aspects of what she thought she was supposed to do wasn't even her desire to do in the first place. So I think that she'll be able to go back into her core life, and with just a new perspective on it, and start over. Because I mean, if we kind of look at the whole situation, I mean, in her core life, I mean, she's just been fired from her job. And I know a lot of times, when we're fired from a job, we feel like, oh, okay, the world's coming to an end. But really, it's an opportunity for a change in your life. And if you're not happy in your life, it's a great opportunity to try something completely different. And, for her, I mean, us looking at her life, I mean, she doesn't have any, she's not in a relationship. So she doesn't have anybody else that's going to tell her what to do or how to do it, or not tell her what to do, but uh, influence her. That's probably the aspect I'm kind of getting at, is there's no one that's going to be trying to get her to do something they want her to do versus what she wants to do. She'll have all the opportunities available to her to explore her own life and try out different things. And I think that, of course, with this library, she's able to try out a lot of different things. So she's going to recognize, before she gets back into her core life, all the possibilities that she may have thought she missed out on aren't even things she's really all that interested in. And now, maybe through this whole journey of going through these different lives, she will realize what she really wants and can focus on that in her core life. I mean, that's my thought on how this is all going to play out. But I mean, who knows? Maybe Matt Haig will have some crazy twist at the end, and it doesn't seem like that kind of a book, though.
now to throw out how yeah. Excuse me, sorry. Now taking this book and adding it to all the other books that we've read and all the things we've learned, and even going to this part, what do we extrapolate out of that for us though to take? Because I think you're right. I got fired basically from 2 jobs, even though I was able to get unemployment. Because they really couldn't prove anything that I did anything. You know, so in that sense, and sometimes like this last go round, I resigned to change what. But how do we going forth for things that are going to come up in the future? How can we look at this and remind ourselves of all the things we've learned and some of this that I'm realizing that it's not always the grass is not always greener on the other side. It's sometimes usually just as bad, or probably in some cases worse. Sometimes it can be better, but going forward, how do we step into continuing to make this life that we're in better? I mean, because we like today, I'm in that feel. I feel it, I understand it, but then tomorrow I wake up and how do we keep it fresh in our minds, and how do we, like I said, going back to all the things we've learned, how do we help keep it forefront to keep moving forward? And how does she keep it forefront? Because who knows if she goes back to her life, will she remember some of this, or will it fade into the back and not really be there as she moves on? It'll be like a vague memory or feeling or something, So that's kind of my question, I guess. And
I don't know. I mean, I feel like, if we look back on all of our different discussions, I mean, they have become, I feel like they are part of us, but yet at the same time, there's a lot we've probably forgotten about what we've talked about. And so if we kind of consider like all these lives she's trying on, kind of like all the self-development books that we've read over the years, we've learned different lessons and we've applied them in our lives, and some of the stuff that we just maybe we could have applied in our life and never got around to it, and then we just kind of forgot about it. But I think if she gets kind of like a new zest for life, if you will, and she overcomes all these, regrets she had for not doing what she thought she was supposed to do, or not being who she thought she was supposed to, or um, getting over this idea that she let everybody down. And I think part of it is what we're telling ourselves. If we go back to any of the books that we've read over the years, the What to Say When You Talk to Yourself from Chad Helmstetter, I think, and Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. Those two books are kind of the core to, I feel like, really changing how we interact in our daily life, with ourselves, not so much interact with everybody else. I mean, yeah, that's part of it, but I think it's all about interacting with ourselves. It's looking at the thoughts that are coming into our head every single day and recognizing, okay, am I thinking this thought because it's a shoulda, woulda, coulda, or am I thinking this thought because I think I'm supposed to? It's either a shoulda, woulda, coulda, or a thought that I'm supposed to do, or whatever. And kind of looking at, I think part of what this journey that she's trying to go through is figuring out what it is she really wants out of life. And I know that can be a struggle, particularly when you have a lot of things going on and you're being pulled in 1,000 directions, and trying to figure out, what is it exactly that I want out of life, and also be dancing in this area of, you know, having everybody else around me who has got expectations from me, and you know, not compromising myself too much, but yet also um you know, being there for my family, and then looking at, you know, what do I really want out of life and how can I work on that as well as be reliable to everybody else, you know. Although, you know, for Nora, I feel like for her, she's kind of got a clear slate to start with, you know, because if she goes back into her core life, she doesn't have a job, she doesn't have a relationship, she doesn't even have a cat, you know. I mean, she could literally drop whatever situation she's in that moment, whatever it is, and start completely over, you know. And if she gets an idea of what it is that she's looking for in life, then she could do that from that moment going forward, and take all of these things she's learned from all of these books in the library, and not do the things that she was doing that were making her unhappy, and do the things that she discovers that make her happy, and kind of focus on that. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it helped because, you know, I'll be honest. I'm sure we've all had those moments in our lives where we know it was, if if I go back and look, I know there were, you know, two or three pivotal moments in my life where, as I look back, I'm really thinking, really wondering, had I really made that decision at that time, how different would my life be? And I know one would have made probably the biggest change in how my life moved forward is back when I was, you know, after I graduated high school and been out of uh, school a little while and going to UNLV, you know, UNLV here, but I really wanted to go to ASU to pursue. I knew I wanted to get my degree in accounting, and I knew I wanted to go somewhere that was better than UNLV. UNLV was good, but it was not the school that probably could have catapulted me somewhere where it might have been better. That would have been ASU. But I didn't, my mom wasn't going to pay for my schooling, so I had to figure out ways to do it myself. And at one point, I was willing to pick up and move and go down, you know, and live in Arizona, you know, Phoenix in that area, and um, work there for a year or two, and then apply, you know, and start working and seeing if I could get scholarships, grants, you know, federal aid, whatever. But when my mom talked to me, she pointed out some other things, and I kind of followed what and I say it this way, not meaning anything mean or anything towards her, but I kind of followed what she wanted. I don't think she wanted us to leave or go anywhere. She really needed me and my brothers here for her. I hate to say it, I think it was a little bit personal and a little bit uh you know me centric rather than seeing what might have been good for us in some ways. Um, but I never took that route. But I know, I think if I would have gone down there, it would have forced me to really rely on myself more and to pick up. And who knows, I may not have been able to get into ASU. It's a very expensive school. You know, I might have had to, you know, but it would have, and I'm sure it would have done a whole different trajectory on my life. And there are parts of me that would have liked to have seen how that worked out. That's the only one real time in my life I really wish in some ways, really wish I would have taken that direction. But then when I come back and I look at this, I wouldn't be here with you guys, with people I love and cherish and have come to value as being a part of my life. And I consider you like little extensions of my family and my world and things like that. So I look at that and I'm trying to put it into context of like what she's doing here, you know, but I don't think there's any right or true right or true wrong answer in this case. That's, you know, but it makes one wonder and think and look when you read a book like this, you know, because it forces you to even really look at your own life. And all the little lives that are encompassed in it each and every day with the people we interact, the things we do, how we, so it's interesting how, this book has made me kind of go back to, some things haven't thought about in quite a while.
Yeah, it's interesting how when you guys were talking, and I'll go all the way back to something you said very early on, Dan, in regards to thinking about um, are we really like living our lives, or are we letting it happen kind of thing? And that kind of struck me as like it seems, if I look back over my life, sometimes I've been really living it with focus and dedication to determine my um, reaching my goals at a certain time and a certain way, and then other times sort of um, um, using the momentum that I've acquired, and then allowing that to um, sort of just let things happen, as though I'm moving in the right direction. So what else is there? And I wonder how much that really determines things so much, and that some of us seem like completely focused and determined all of the time throughout our life, maybe more so than others, and others are more like that feather on the wind of the Forrest Gump type of a thing, and yet there seems to be no right or wrong answer to it, um, except in our own minds and what we accept, and then that kind of depends on what we decide to let it depend on, as far as what we believe is important, in the time, in the moment. Um, how much we're open to different things, um, and whatnot. In this scene, Nora says she kind of ends. If I heard it correctly, she sort of ends up saying that she felt like she was comfortable in that life path. She kind of liked that life path, um, and yet it was sort of an opposite of what she was used to. She still was musically inclined, but she didn't really pursue that path. And cats weren't a part of her life as much as dogs were, but yet she felt comfortable in the light. Yet she also felt like, um, at this point in the book, she's able to sense things a little bit differently, and she felt like perhaps this that life path was better suited for the Nora that had fallen in love with Dylan. But that's also her assuming that she wouldn't gain those memories back, that she would, if she stayed there, she wouldn't gain the memories back that would remind her of why she fell in love with him. So that is kind of a another force. And how many forces do we have in our lives that we're allowing or choosing to go by, to be our kind of our thrust or our repulsion or our gravity that tends to that we rely on to um, give us direction in our lives.
I think it's amazing that it's still just last night. You know what I mean? Like when I read that, I was like, oh, that's right. Like, this is just one night all this stuff is happening in, or one split second, or whatever, however you want to think about it.
Wow.
And isn't that funny how life is kind of like that, at least for me? There's times in my life where it felt like things were just dragging and dragging and dragging along, and yet, maybe a month later or a year later or whatever, you look back and where has the time gone? It seems like just a split second since my kids were little, or it just seems like entire decades of my life can be erased in a second. I don't know. It's very strange how time works, but obviously, I mean, to me, the main message is what she's thinking about things. It's her thoughts about things. And when we look back at all the books that we've studied, that has pretty much been the entire message all along, is, what are thoughts? What are we thinking? What are we basing our decisions on? How do we let those invisible influences, our parents, or our school or our religion or whatever it was, how are we not recognizing those invisible influences in our life? Because so many of our decisions are convoluted with those things, and we don't even realize it half the time. But no matter what it is, when you have an upset in your life, realize that there are multiple ways of looking at it. There are. You can't just look at a situation from one point of view. And that's the value of this stepping back and being the observer. That's the value of that, is being able to get a different perspective on a situation. And then if you put yourself perhaps in the shoes of, if there's another person involved, look at it from their perspective. If you look at it from the perspective of just an innocent bystander watching the situation, what would their perspective be? I mean, there's always so many different ways to look at a situation. And so, and as humans, there are so many, oh my gosh, there's just so much that everyone has experienced. And so another perspective is, comparing, not that I like comparing necessarily, but for me, it helps me when I'm in a situation and I think about all my ancestors that have been in that situation, and how they got through it. And not only that situation, but much, much, much worse situations, and how they got through that. And that gives me strength and inspires me to not be so weak, and to stand up stronger and do what I need to do, as opposed to just melting into my little pity party or something. So my ancestors support me a lot, but that is a way of thinking, you know, and that's all it is. It's just a way of thinking. It's not, some people may not have any, that might not do anything for them. They may not care what their ancestors did, or they might not give any credence to that at all. So, but each person there isn't like one magic pill for everybody. Each person has to find their own way to deal with their situations, and how to pull yourself out of the spiral of despair, or whatever you want to call it, because that spiral is there for everybody. At any moment we can all step into that spiral. It's really easy, especially with everything going on in the world right now. I am, because I help people with their health, I am surrounded with people with very aggressive cancers right now, and different things that it just seems to me like the crazier the world gets, the more people are wanting to check out and say, the heck with this, let's just go start another one somewhere. I don't know, but you have to keep things in perspective because, and not to say that you should beat yourself up over things all the time or anything, but sometimes you just need a quick kick in the butt to like quit feeling sorry for yourself and realize that there's some really real shit going on in the world that other people are dealing with. And we're pretty blessed. I woke up with no bombs going on over my head. When I went to bed last night, my my biggest concern was my grandmother, who her health has taken a turn. Um, but I didn't fear for my life when I went to bed last night. I mean, there's some real stuff going on that I'm quite sheltered from, and I feel extremely blessed. And when I look back at my life, you were talking, Dan. There's times I don't know how I got through some of those times, but I did, and I was always supported and blessed somehow, and that's where my faith comes from because man, I wouldn't have known how to get out of some of those situations, but I was brought through them. So, but again, that's just another way of thinking. That's just my way of thinking about it. So,
But I think you bring up some good points. That's part of, we all have to, in the moments and in those times, in those moments, we have to sometimes quickly think. Other times we can step back and take a long, hard pause and look at things, and sometimes that's the beauty of life. We get both thrown at us, and you know, it's just the way life is. But I was what's been going on in my head when we were talking about how, like in this chance, Nora's, even though in her root life she's basically committed suicide, she's getting that chance to review and look and see. And so to me, it says, is there a possibility that somehow she might be able to be resuscitated, or something happens to where she can go back and with what she learned out of this to be able to carry forward and move her life whichever direction she decides to go. Whereas some of us, we don't go. Uh, I think we all have our, I'm going to say, epiphany moments where we realize that, okay, this is either almost kind of like do or die, not necessarily physically. Some cases it's just do or die. If I go here, it's this. But there are some people that really even go like another step where, when you were talking about checking out, where people kind of just check out of their lives. They, leave a wife and kid and stuff and just kind of check out and then go off and, disappear. And, you don't hear from them forever. Case in point, my mom's first husband, after they got divorced, he kind of just disappeared, never came around to see any of us or anything. And I'm talking about my mom down here. Um, for my brother, that was his biological dad. You know, it it created a lot of, I think, resentment and hurt and pain for him. But he never went looking. Well, they tried a little bit, but they couldn't find anything. Then all of a sudden, just in a happenstance, they came across where he was, and he was living back east somewhere, and they met up. But I don't think it changed his feelings per se about him, but I think it gave closure in a sense, but it hasn't really, I don't think, affected the life. But all those years, and but for the people that decided to kind of just check out, maybe that was what, they're like, okay, this is not the life I wanted. This is not the life I thought I would have. Let me just hate to say it this way, cut my losses and go start new. And some people do that. Whereas, the majority of us kind of, we don't go that route. And I think how do I say this? We stick through it, hoping that somehow we can, in most cases, we want to make it better or work it towards. But sometimes, and the way I say this is not going to come out right, but sometimes there's a little bit to be said of just cutting your losses and kind of starting over, and sometimes, that's for your own, I guess, maybe deep down sanity or whatever, for your survivals. Sometimes that I'm not saying I don't believe it would be right for me. I don't think I could do that. I would love to have that ability in me sometimes to say, okay, I'm done. I'm just going and, but it's just not part of my inner working. But I think, sometimes there are people that need that because if they don't, I think they slowly die too, if you get what I'm getting at. So, but I think we can kind of stop that point here and say, okay, I'm going to still be here, but I'm going to make the choices to move that direction that I want to go to. And but sometimes that's a very hard thing to follow through on because of everything happening around us too.
Yeah, and it's also hard to figure out like what are you cutting your losses, and like when you're talking about it, I figure like the opposite of cutting your losses would be to double down on whatever it is you're doing, right? But however, you've got to first realize what it is that's brought you to where you are, um, or has not brought you to where you want to be, and is it are you what are where you're cutting your losses? Are you cutting, possibly maybe you need, cut out the things in your life that's creating that spiral or holding you back, or it might be the thoughts that are holding you back, or the um, whatever it might be, like what like Samantha was saying in regards to having a clean slate. If you have a clean slate, um, to me, wow, that's great. You have an opportunity, but if you still allow the same um, thought patterns to um, sort of guide you in whatever new direction you're going, you might sort of still end up with similar results. So do you unless you're aware of what it is that what it is that you're cutting out of your life to move forward, or what it is you're going to double down on, then you might just end up being doubling down on the things that are holding you back without realizing it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jason. When Dan was talking earlier about uh like the one thing that he says that it like if he made it if could have done something different, it would have been this one thing way back when, right? And I've had thoughts about that before too, of if I had just I have this one kind of pivotal moment in my life where I feel like if I had just made a different decision than that my life would be completely different. And yet at the same time, like you're saying, Jason, I'm still that person. What's the cliche saying? Wherever you go, there you are. And I feel like that's true. Is that no matter what life I would have ended up in, if I'd gone and had the same thought patterns that I have in my life right now, I would have had similar results in some way. I may not have the exact same family members or the exact same everything, but it would be a similar life. I'd still end up in this point in my life where I am. I don't know whether it be now or at some point, of having this types of thought processes. I may not have these same friends or these same actions or whatever, but I think that I would still end up in generally the same spot. And so whenever I think that, oh, I wish I'd have made a different choice or whatever, I got to stop myself and be like, wait a second, why am I experiencing this depression in this moment, or this dissatisfaction in my life in this moment, or this anger or resentment or whatever it is that is causing me to feel blah, whatever I'm feeling right now. And it always comes back around to the thoughts that I'm thinking about it. And if I change those thoughts about what I'm thinking, the thoughts that I'm thinking about any given situation, as I realize, I have control over what I experience in this life that I have. I've made all these choices that have gotten me to here. And I recognize I'm the one that made all those choices to get to here. That's a huge thing that I think a lot of people don't take responsibility for where they are in their life right now. They blame, like earlier in here, what was the section where maybe it was when Nora saw the sign about string theory being closed, and she realized, oh, maybe it wasn't my fault. But the owner of the store, I think his name is Neil, had kind of blamed her, like it was her fault that all the customers had gone, didn't want to be there because of her wet blanket attitude or whatever. And but that's what people tend to do. They tend to blame everybody else for where they are in their life. It's like for years and years in the earlier parts of my relationship with Chris, I blamed him for being in the situation that we were in. I blamed him for me being there in our life and being unhappy. And the truth is it was all about how I was thinking about it. And I had not taken responsibility for the fact that I chose every action, every decision that I made brought me to where we were in our relationship at that time. And every dissatisfaction, every frustration, every resentment, every anger, all of that was because of the way that I was thinking about any given thing in any given moment. And when I was able to accept that I was the one that was making myself miserable, it didn't have a dang thing to do with what he was doing or not doing or any of that. It was just me making myself miserable because of all of the ought to's, shouldas, coulda, this is what I'm supposed to do, supposed to act, supposed to be. It was all of that. And I think that whenever we feel like we are angry or frustrated or whatever emotion it is that's coming up that's making us feel less than great, is to really examine what thoughts are behind that, because odds are good we're telling ourselves some bullshit. And if we can recognize that, then we have that opportunity to change that thought and tell ourselves something completely different. I mean, if I was to sit here and just tell myself how annoyed I am all the time at what my husband does, or how upset I am for him not doing this or not doing that, or for my kids being whatever they are, or my grandchildren for screaming, if I just told myself how upset I am about all these different things, I would be miserable every single day. So I have that capability of making myself miserable from minute to minute. But I can also choose to, okay, yeah, the grandchildren are screaming, but it's okay. They just want this, whatever it is. Really, they just need affection or whatever, and it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I'm being impatient. Yeah, it's all these different things that we tell ourselves, right? So if I look at the fact that, okay, now I'm watching my grandchildren and I can focus on the stuff that I'm not getting done or the things that I wish I could be doing, or I could focus on the fact that they're all at this age where they're just full of wonder, and that I get to be there and experience that with them. And what can I do in this moment to make this just a pleasurable time, even though we're dealing with potty training and screaming and all of that mumbo jumbo? How can I make this, each one of these days, it's all how I'm looking at it, and And that's huge. It's, and when we're talking about relationships with our spouse, if we're angry at each other or upset or resentful or whatever, I can choose to, instead of focusing on this one thing I'm annoyed by, I can focus on the things that I appreciate about them. And that changes things like magic. I mean, it's ridiculous to think about how we can be so miserable in a situation because of all this mumbo jumbo that we're saying to ourselves, and then we can just flip the switch and say something completely different and say, okay, this is what I'm actually happy about in this situation. I mean, whatever it is, because we're all faced with struggles, we're all faced with bills and house related things. Like this house, here's a good example. This house, we moved in here, and it's a big house, and it has a big mortgage, and it has all this property. And I can sit here and I can think about all of the maintenance things that are going to need to get done, all of the stuff that is breaking or old or falling apart or whatever. And if I think about all those things, it makes me stressed out. It makes me anxious. It makes me worried about the future. It makes me wonder if it's just going to fall down around me. Those are all the things that it is. Or I can sit here and go, gosh, I have this amazing property. It's I can go outside. The kids, like we're taking the kids out and we're outside playing soccer in the front yard, and I'm teaching them how to kick the ball, and we have this space that is just wonderful. And I can think to myself, okay, yes, there's a lot of maintenance things that need to get done, but they don't have to get done right in this moment. So I don't have to stress about that. That's something that, we can do little bits over time. I don't have to get it all done in this moment, and I can, yeah, the business is doing its thing, and we've got stuff going on with that. And, well, there's always going to be something coming at us in one way or another, whether it's, some family member having some situation we have to help out with, or whether it's a truck breaks down or the kids are screaming. I mean, there's always going to be something. So I just have to remember to think about the things that are positive versus all the stuff that's negative, because otherwise I'd just be making myself miserable all day, every day. It's like, Dan, I mean, Ubering, I've done, I did that for a little while. I know how stressful that can be. And yet at the same time, I also know that, depending on when you're up, you get to see the sunrise, you get to see the sunset, you get to see interesting things happening in your city, or see areas of town that you've never seen before. Or sometimes you're just going to sit and wait for another person to choose you for a ride. And yet, in that time that you're sitting there going, oh God, I don't have a ride, I also have a moment where I am absolutely nothing else. I don't have to do anything else other than just sit here and enjoy this moment. And it's like people, when they're upset because they're in a traffic jam, they're like, I gotta get here, and they can't because traffic's doing what it's doing. And yet there's that moment where you could just sit, you don't have to be anywhere. Well, I mean, you do, but technically you can't. So you just you need to take that moment and just be like, I'm right here, right now. What is beautiful in this moment? What can I enjoy? And I think that's the key, is finding what you can enjoy in any given moment, regardless of what's going on. Because if we're always focused on the crap that's coming at us, then we're always going to be grumpy about the crap that's coming at us, So that's my thoughts.
Oh, you brought up a good point though, and I think it ties back into Nora. I don't think she was ever, I mean, I think she had happy moments, but I don't think she was really ever happy in the sense of just being happy to be happy, if you understand, like you're saying, to be happy because right at this moment, like like I said, count your blessings. Okay, I'm in the car. Yes, I'm stuck in traffic. Yes, I need to be somewhere, but I'm not going on foot, or I'm not in the bus or crowded with people that, or, there are lots of things. And I think that's, one part of it. And then, or we could just like teasing you a little bit, just add it to the list and put it, for another day, but I think we all do that. I think we all have those lists, even if they're lists in our heads of, okay, this is this, and we get so focused on all those things, and it's not even really bad things, they're not really bad things either. We're just caught up with so much of the mishmash of everything out there in the world, good and bad, that we kind of lose ourselves in that process, I think. And I think you're right. Sometimes it's nice to just have that time to, and I think we're given those moments. We just don't take those moments captive enough, like when we're stuck in traffic or when we come across a situation where, I was really frustrated with my printer because I could not get it to reconnect to my laptop so I could print it. And I finally, didn't do it for like a day or two. And then I finally came back and I got it. But it was like, but my brain, and I'll admit it was in the back of my brain constantly sitting there. And it kind of, in some ways, sometimes overtook other thinking where I could have been in those moments where, so I think we do short circuit ourselves on a lot of things too sometimes that, and I think Nora does that to herself a lot too. And, and focused on the wrong things. And that's, I think, another key takeaway out of this book is I think we focus a lot of times on the wrong things going on in our lives that really are not that big of a deal if we look in the grand scheme of things, and if we look at where we want to go, where we want to be, and looking out for our well-being too, because we have to look out for our well-being first, our stable mind, our that, because nobody else will do it first for us. They will do it, but we're our own best line of defense too. In that case, I think, sometimes we need to, like me, sometimes I come home and I just draw the line. It's like, I'm not turning on the TV. I'm not turning this on. I'm not turning, even if I'm still doing some stuff around the house, but I'm not turning anything on. So I can just kind of decompress and be in my moment, even if I'm thinking of stuff. And a lot of times I am, but half the time I don't even remember what I was thinking of. I'm just trying to do stuff or relax or chill to get in the moment. So that way, when I actively get into doing things that I want to do a little bit more, I'm a little more present in that moment. So with that, I think, um, this book has brought up a lot of things that have been brought out in other books, but maybe this book bringing them out in another way by actively looking at somebody's life who is now having a chance to step out outside of herself and step into other lives to see how that might have changed her life. But again, would that really be the life that she wants or that we want if we were to really look in some of those directions?
The other thing that I have to remind myself of a lot is that, or again, this is just something that I think to get myself through certain situations, is that, life is happening for me, not to me. And so whatever character, whatever situation is upsetting me at the time, I have to remember that that is a being who loves me dearly, who is playing a part for my benefit. And what is it about that situation that I'm learning? And that thinking that way keeps me from all the blame and shame and other crap that my brain can put in there, that is a soul being that we're so we love each other so much that we would come here and play sometimes horrible parts. But that deep down, that person, it's not that they don't love me, or it's not, in fact, it's that they love me so much that they would come and play that part. So I try to keep that in mind all the time.
Yeah, that book that we read that kind of brought that up as a possibility, the Your Soul's Plan. I think that was what it was called. Do you remember who the author was on that? I can't remember who it was.
I can't remember.
But I'm sure if anybody looked it up, Your Soul's Plan, that was kind of the concept, is that you kind of pre-plan before you come here with a group of other souls of, what part you're going to play, so that the person whose life kind of like is the main character in that particular life is getting the experience or trying to work through learning a lesson of this particular life or whatever, and that everybody comes in and kind of plays a part to help that person on that journey. And when we first, Robert Schwartz, right, okay, Robert Schwartz was, yeah, Your Soul's Plan. And I thought that was a really interesting concept, that if that's something that is a real thing, then to look at it that way, I think can be hugely powerful, particularly if we look at key people in our lives who were a significant influence on us in some way. It's like when I was reading a book by Wayne Dyer, and he was talking about how his dad had kind of checked out, like Dan was talking about. He was an alcoholic, and I think he had left the family, and Wayne had always had this, um, you know, uh, thinking these thoughts of being less than because his dad wasn't there, or because his dad had left, or he thought it was kind of taking this blame on himself as if it was his fault, or even though he was a kid when it happened, we tend to do that, right? Where whatever it is that our significant people in our life do, we think they've done it to us, for whatever reason, and that's caused us to have huge issues in our life. But when he kind of he finally found his dad's grave or something along that lines, and he was able to forgive his dad because he realized that, okay, dad's just doing the best that he can do with what he had to work with. It wasn't about me, but yet at the same time, there's this aspect of, like from Your Soul's Plan, if that person came here and played that role purposely because we asked them to do that, I mean, that changes your whole dynamic on that, of, okay, we realized that this person, even though they were a real shit in our life, that on the other side, they're just a spirit being just like we are, who is helping us learn some lesson in this life that we chose to want to learn. So it's another different perspective on this whole idea of that we taking responsibility for our own, where we are in our own lives, as if, I mean, we made all the choices to get here, and taking that a step further, we even made the choices of this is all going to happen, like from our soul's perspective, as we planned ahead, this is exactly what we wanted to happen, and that's what we've created for ourselves in this life, and we're going through it and trying to kind of I don't know, identify what it is that we want. Why did we choose this? Why did we ask for our soul partners to come in here and be these roles in our lives? What is it that, what's the deeper thing that we are trying to experience in this life because of all these things that have happened? And and again, this, like Catherine was saying earlier on, I mean, this is just a possibility of a perspective. But if we look at things from a different way, we gain a new perspective, and we can choose any beliefs that we want. And if we wanted to believe that belief, then that's what is going to help us to shape our lives in the now. And or if it is all in how we think about things. I mean, it still just comes down to that. It's how are we thinking about this whole situation? If we're thinking about these people in our lives that have hurt us, and if we think about it as if they came here just to hurt us and no other reason, and then that is going to make us miserable, right? But if we think about it in terms of, a greater spiritual kind of a something that, okay, we chose this, we planned this out, this is what we were wanting because, then there's a whole idea that we can discover the underlying whatever it is in our lives. And I feel like being human it's all about discovery. It's all about exploration and curiosity. And because I feel like, what other point is there? I mean, it's just, it seems it's all about just because we're here to do what we can do because we can. And, um, and we can choose to look at it from any way that we want. So, what are we choosing in this moment? What is it that we want to experience? What do we want to feel? What do we want to believe about our lives? Do we want to believe that, we're on a path to destruction and that no matter what we do, it's always going to fall apart? Do we want to believe that? Or do we want to believe that everything that happens in my life is something to be, it's a curious thing to be examined and looked at and explored, and with a sense of wonder of, oh, what could happen? What is exciting about this? I mean, I, I think as humans, that's our nature is to be curious and to explore things and examine and continue to expand and grow in different ways. And when we are focused on our lives in that way, I feel like we're the most productive, most happy, most energized, and whatever. It's when we wallow in our own bullshit that we're the most unreason or most unhappy and dissatisfied. And so we get to choose, what do we want to focus on? What do we want to believe about this life existence? If I sit here and think, oh, okay, what in the freaking hell is the point of all this mumbo jumbo, then that makes me miserable. But if I think of it as this is just some great exploration into humanity, this is interesting. I can think about it, and this is very interesting. And look at all these wondrous things I get to experience: pain and pleasure and happiness and sadness and craziness. And I mean, there's a never ending list of experiences I can experience in this life. All I have to do is just experience it and observe and watch and look and check and see. And I don't know, I'm the only one limiting any of it, I guess. So. All right, I'm muting now.
Well, I think it leads to growth in our own self and what we're trying to create for our life, for lack of a better way. And I think you're right. I think if we look at all of the things that are come about in our lives, whether good or bad, they're meant for something. And if we work through the bad, ultimately knowing that it's teaching us something and that we can take that and grow to carry with for the good, then hopefully it helps make the good all that much more pleasant, or more enjoyable, or how and you're right, we do have that choice to make of how we're going to look at it, how we're going to walk through it and take it with us as we go through it and press on. But the bad doesn't have to determine the total outcome. It can be an aspect that helps, for me, I think, grow me as a person into the best person I can be. And while I may not like a lot of what has happened, but somehow I made choices and decisions before that happened that helped bring that about. So even though I blame everybody else a lot, I'm human, I do that a lot. But when it comes down to it, if I'm honest with myself, I am partially to blame too, because I still think we can have outside influences come in and add to it and create more than what we did ourselves. And sometimes the choices we make, because what that brings in and adds to, we can make instances worse before they get better, because we're in those moments and with that. But ultimately, I think it's our choice if we're going to work ourselves and get out of it. We're the only ones that can truly get ourselves out of it by going back to, a book, change our thoughts, change our lives, moving in that direction to get ourselves out of it. Because nobody else can do it for us. We have to do it for ourselves. So, wow, it's 8:30. We've been going.
Yeah, I got to go watch the eclipse.
Yeah, it's still overcast here, so I don't think I'm going to see it. But all right, we'll let everybody go for today. We'll come back around. I'm sure we'll talk about this more next week. So with that, guys, for those of you who are watching, if you found this entertaining or interesting, or you've learned something from it, give us a like, share it with anybody else you think that could benefit from it. And if you'd like to participate with us, just look for a link below this video on YouTube and you can find our Facebook group or find how to get on with us. So we'd love to have you. Okay, wrapping up for today, guys. Love you. Have a great, awesome, amazing week. We'll see you next time on the Saturday Morning Mastermind. Bye for now.